Thank you. Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. I thank Your Highnesses for your hospitality, for your steadfast support for the World Health Organization and global health, and for the opportunity to address you today. It's a great pleasure to be back in Dubai. I was honored to be here in December last year for COP28, the first COP to include a day dedicated to health. And I thank the UAE for its leadership in giving health such a prominent place in climate agenda. It was the first of its kind, and thank you, UAE, for being a pathfinder. 147 countries signed the COP28 UAE Declaration on Climate and Health, recognizing that the climate crisis is a health crisis. In particular, I thank the UAE for its support for the WHO Global Logistics Hub here in Dubai, which has become an essential part of WHO's operational response to health emergencies around the world. Last year, the hub distributed medical supplies for 50 million people in emergency situations in 81 countries in every region of the world: Afghanistan, Chad, Fiji, Haiti, Papua New Guinea, Sri Lanka, Ukraine, Venezuela, Yemen, and more. Since the hub opened in 2015 in Dubai, it has expanded sevenfold, from 3,000 to 20,000 square meters. Indeed, the hub is currently playing a vital role in our response to several emergencies around the world, including the ongoing crisis in Gaza. So far, we have delivered 447 metric tons of medical supplies to Gaza. But it's a drop in the ocean of need, which continues to grow every day. Only 15 out of 36 hospitals are still partially or minimally functional in Gaza. Health workers are doing their best in impossible circumstances. I'm especially concerned by the recent attacks on Rafah, where the majority of Gaza's population has fled from the destruction to the north. WHO continues to call for safe access for humanitarian personnel and supplies. We continue to call for hostages held by Hamas to be released, and we continue to call for a ceasefire. Excellencies, on the 12th of February 2018, the same day, 6 years ago, exactly 6 years ago, I stood on this stage and said the world was not prepared for a pandemic, and expressed my concern at that time that a pandemic can happen anytime. And as you remember, less than 2 years later, in December 2019, COVID-19 pandemic struck. And indeed, the world was not prepared. Today, I stand before you in the aftermath of COVID-19, with millions of people dead, with social, economic, and political shocks that reverberate to this day. Although some progress has been made, like improvements in surveillance, pandemic fund, and also the establishment of the pathogen sharing hub, and building capacities in vaccine production, which is a record time, and the periodic review we have started, still the world is not prepared for a pandemic. The cycle of panic and neglect is beginning to repeat. The painful lessons we learned are in danger of being forgotten as attention turns to many other crises confronting our world. But if we fail to learn those lessons, we will pay dearly next time. And there will be a next time. History teaches us that the next pandemic is a matter of when, not if. It may be caused by an influenza virus or a new coronavirus, or it may be caused by a new pathogen we don't even know about yet, or what we call disease X. There has been a lot of attention on disease X, especially recently. But in fact, it's not a new thing. We first used the term disease X in 2018. It was just the same time I spoke here in this government summit in 2018. And we used disease X as a placeholder for a disease we don't even know about yet, but for which we can nonetheless prepare. COVID-19 was a disease X, a new pathogen causing a new disease. But there will be another disease X, or a disease Y, or a disease Z. And as things stand, the world remains unprepared for the next disease X and the next pandemic. If it struck tomorrow, we would face many of the same problems we faced with COVID-19. It's for this reason that in December 2021, WHO's member states met in Geneva and agreed to develop an international agreement on pandemic preparedness and response, a legally binding pact to work together to keep themselves and each other safe. Countries set themselves a deadline to complete the agreement in time for adoption for the World Health Assembly in May of this year. That's now just 15 weeks away. However, there are currently two major obstacles to meeting that deadline. The first is a group of issues on which countries have not yet reached consensus. They're making progress, but there are still areas of differences that need further negotiation between countries. None of them are insurmountable. If countries listen to each other's concerns, I'm confident they can find common ground and a common approach. The second major barrier is the litany of lies and conspiracy theories about the agreement. That it's a power grab by the World Health Organization, that it will cede sovereignty to WHO, that it will give WHO power to impose lockdowns or vaccine mandates on countries, that it's an attack on freedom, that WHO will not allow people to travel, and that WHO wants to control people's lives. These are some of the lies that are being spread. If these lies weren't so dangerous, these lies would be funny. But they put the health of the world's people at risk. And that is no laughing matter. These claims are utterly, completely, categorically false. The pandemic agreement will not give WHO any power over any state or any individual for that matter. Anyone who says it will is either uninformed or lying. But don't take my word for it. The draft agreement is available on the WHO website for anyone who wants to read it. And anyone who does will not find a single sentence or a single word giving WHO any power over sovereign states. You know, countries are even talking about sovereign AI, as we have seen in the previous panel. The same way, countries will keep their sovereignty. That's because it's sovereign states themselves who are writing the agreement. Why should they agree to cede sovereignty to WHO? We cannot allow this historic agreement, this milestone in global health, to be sabotaged by those who spread lies, either deliberately or unknowingly. Let me be clear. WHO did not impose anything on anyone during the COVID-19 pandemic. Not lockdowns, not mask mandates, not vaccine mandates. We don't have the power to do that. We don't want it, and we're not trying to get it. Our job is to support governments with evidence-based guidance, advice, and when needed, supplies to help them protect their people. But the decisions are theirs, and so is the pandemic agreement. It has been written by countries, for countries, and will be implemented in countries in accordance with their own national laws. In fact, WHO will not even be a party to the agreement. The parties are governments and governments alone. Far from ceding sovereignty, the agreement actually affirms national sovereignty and national responsibility in its foundational principles. Indeed, the agreement is itself an exercise of sovereignty. It's about the commitments countries are making to keep themselves and each other safer from pandemics. And it recognizes that they can only do that by working with each other. Let me tell you what the agreement does say. It's a set of commitments by countries to strengthen the world's defenses in several areas, to strengthen prevention with a One Health approach, the health and care workforce, research and development, access to vaccines and other products, sharing of information, technology and biological samples, and more. Now, I ask you, what is so problematic about those commitments? Is there anyone who thinks countries should not cooperate? Does anyone think countries should not share information? Does anyone think some people are more deserving than others of access to vaccines and other tools? In our interconnected and interdependent world, countries can only keep themselves safe if they work with each other. In that sense, the pandemic agreement is a commitment to national security. It's in every country's own national interest, because pathogens have no regard for the lines humans draw on maps, not for the color of our politics, the size of our economies, or the strength of our military. For everything that makes us different, we are one humanity, the same species, sharing the same DNA and the same planet. We have no future but a common future. Common threats then demand a common response. That's why this pandemic agreement is so important. Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, the COVID-19 pandemic inflicted huge losses on communities, countries, businesses, and economies. Those losses must not be in vain and must not be repeated. It's possible or even likely that we will face another pandemic in our lifetimes. We can't know how mild or severe it might be, but we can be ready. Are we ready now? Not yet. That's why the pandemic agreement is mission critical for humanity. It's a pact with the future that we will not expose the generations who follow us to the same suffering that we endured. Had it been in place before COVID-19, had the agreement been in place before COVID-19, we would not have lost so much. Now is the moment for leadership from the highest levels of government to deliver the pandemic agreement to the World Health Assembly in 15 weeks' time. Now is the time to say no to inequity, no to lies and misinformation, and yes to international cooperation, yes to equity, and yes to solidarity. As the generation that lived through COVID-19, we have a collective responsibility to protect future generations from the suffering we endured. May history record that we rose to that responsibility and made the world a healthier, safer, and fairer place. Shukran jazilan. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for this main address.
الحضور الكريم، نستكمل باقي الجلسات في هذه القاعة ظهر هذا اليوم. إلى حين ذلك يمكنكم حضور الجلسات المنعقدة بالتوازي في القاعات المخصصة لها. شكرا لكم.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will resume our sessions in this hall this afternoon. In the meantime, you may attend other breakout sessions taking place at the dedicated halls. Thank you.
Is where you start having truly intelligent assistants. Those assistants would be something different than that's achievable today. Today, you can solve kind of the first level type of problem. Let me ask you a question, let me interrogate information. The intelligent assistants will be able to think about a problem like we do, like a big problem, and break it down into steps, where the output and the decision or the outcome of one step actually tells you what the next step should be. We're not there yet. But these kind of larger type of system two type of questions would be, I think, the next step. And then the third is fully autonomous systems. And I'll let others speak about that kind of place.
Yeah. There's been a lot of hype, I think it's fair to say, over the last 12 months in particular, around generative AI. How do you avoid falling into the trap of building something because it seems buzzy and popular? And how do people here take that away and apply it in a government environment?
So although my title is Chief Technology Officer, I am very adverse about following the fads in the tech industry. I joke about with people and say half my job is keeping the silly technology out of my company. I don't think this is one of them, but we do have to understand what's hype and what's real. When we look at generative AI, you have to understand that today, and I'm talking about like what you can use today, whether it's the open source models or the models that you get from Google or OpenAI. Underlying these systems like ChatGPT, there's a large language model. The model has a statistical understanding of language. It does not have a ground truth. And so they often will tell you something incredibly convincing, but is wrong. So they don't really have a great view of the world. And in finance and in government, accuracy is paramount. And so you have to work really hard today to take a model, a large language model, and make sure it's telling the truth. It's not simple. The second thing is, in finance, we care a lot about history. We care a lot about what's happened over time. And these models actually don't understand the temporal relationships between the things that it learned. And finally, irrespective of all the hype, these models actually don't reason very well. They're not actually understanding logical concepts. They don't do math well. So you put this all together and say, how do you use that for finance? And it's challenging. It's challenging.
How do you approach data provenance and making sure that people know where the answers that they're getting, like where they originate? What is the source of that information?
Yeah, well, first of all, that's what we do. That's what Bloomberg does every day. For 40 years, we have been collecting a massive amount of high-value data, highly valuable data, and we've been cataloging it and really, truly understanding what's useful, what's not, and we keep track of all that provenance. And with the way we're thinking about using generative AI today is, our philosophy is that generative AI is just an ingredient, just one ingredient that we're going to mix with all of our trusted sources of information, our databases, those trusted documents, our analytics that we've built, and embed it into the workflows that we currently have. We do not want to allow the large language model to give the answer to our customers because of all those problems that we just mentioned. But we can use it to understand what the customer is asking. We can use it to get to the trusted source of information. And so when you think about how we're using generative AI, we really think about it as a whole system. The large language model is one part. There's many different interesting aspects that, or products that we can build that we already are building today. In fact, we just released our first generative AI-based product just last month. And it was an earnings transcript summarization. So the problem is that you have analysts who are covering companies, and during earnings season, there's lots of these earnings calls where the CEO or CFO are talking about really material aspects of a company. Analysts have to pour through these, have to either listen on the call, they have to read the transcripts, and it's daunting. And it's just one example of the bigger problem we're trying to solve. There's so much information, human beings cannot keep up with it. So we need to use AI to help humans deal with this information, right? And so we did something really novel. We worked with our domain experts, our analysts, and we said, what are the questions you would ask that transcript? I know that sounds funny, but that's how you have to think about it. And we were able to create answers, AI-generated answers, within all these different topics about guidance and liability and all sorts of other topics. And the way we think about this is we always want to keep the user in the driver's seat. These are assistants. We are not automating everything away. And so when you look at the application, you have the transcript in front of the user, and on the side, you have all these bulleted points of summaries. Those are AI generated. But the user can just click on any one bullet point, and we highlight, we scroll to the paragraphs, and we highlight the paragraphs that were used to generate that bullet point. Transparency and attribution are fundamental to building these systems today, and I think it's going to be true in government as well. You need to show your work. We need to show all the steps that went into synthesizing the answer. We need to show all the steps to our users, whether they're internal government workers or in finance, or to citizens or our clients. We have to show them this is really what happened. And yes, this is a great tool, but let me show you all the work. That builds trust. And you get directly to that source document, and they can look at the provenance. They can look and interrogate things. And so this is our philosophy, how we're doing this. We have a number of really exciting, very powerful tools that we're in, and features and functionality that's coming out in the next few months throughout this whole year. And it really is changing the nature of how our customers interact with this massive amount of data. You know, this transcript summarization is just the beginning. What's coming soon is the ability to ask a symbolic question, a thematic question.
What would an example of that be?
Sure. I'm an analyst today. If I have a big question, I have to go to our search engine and break it down into keywords. We all know how to do that. But the analyst is really thinking of something high level, like, you know, tell me about the slowdown in production of batteries in China and how it's going to affect Ford EVs. That's their question. They often have to go and search through many, many different documents and pull that together. But now you just ask the Bloomberg terminal and you get all the source documents. We look through millions of documents and we find the 6 paragraphs and the 4 documents that are best answer that question. We show them that. We show them the paragraphs that highlight it. We also synthesize the summary for them. So this is a combination of not just large language models, but other AI technology, like dense vector search engines and many others. It's a whole collection of services and components that go into building these systems. Really soon, my team is working on, I see it working, and the ability to ask in human language a question to all of our structured data, our massive amounts of databases that we have on companies and macro information about the economy and commodities, and just be able to ask the question without having to be an expert in coding. We show you the steps. We show you the formula that it generates. We show you everything, but we can just instantly give you that answer. This is a game changer. I think Jensen Huang said it best. This is going to allow anybody to be a programmer. I would like to say it's just going to make every analyst and portfolio manager and trader just be better at their job.
I've heard people say that the next great programming language is English as it relates to AI, but I also think there's a lot more to unpack there. I'm conscious of time, and I'd really like to give people some concrete tips for next steps. You know, if they want to act on things that you've said today, how exactly should, say, a government agency start to recreate in their own fields with their own domain expertise and their own languages what you have been talking about having done with finance?
Okay, well, first and foremost, you should just start. You should start, but start very carefully. I highly suggest the first step in any government agency is to first start collecting and cataloging and understanding the data that you have. That's the value you have. It's that data, and understanding that data is incredibly important. So collecting and cataloging and processing that data to get it ready is actually a pretty hard step. The second thing you have to think about is it's not just collecting the documents and the data, it's actually collecting the experts who truly understand those documents and that data that you have. you need the people to understand that registration form and what it means in all those fields and exactly what those fields mean. And all that language and understand what that means, how it's evolved over time, whether it's filings or other aspects that you might have in your government. Those are the people who are going to be driving the innovation. I know we tend to think of, largely PhDs in computer science and AI experts, but what we found is that you have to build these cross-domain teams, these cross-functional teams, and it's the experts in the data that are truly making these systems successful.
And they're working hand in hand.
Hand in hand, on the whiteboard, talking to experimenting. But those domain experts are incredibly valuable. And you have to start gathering them and starting to work with them. Next, you have to work together in that team, and this is where the domain experts play a big role. What's success look like? How do I test my system? It's actually quite easy to start getting results. This is not about just getting a bunch of documents and throwing it at an LLM and asking it questions. You're going to get results, right? But that's not going to be the good results that you want, right? So you have to spend the time to actually understand what's your success criteria. What am I actually trying to achieve, and how am I going to verify that? And as I evolve my system, how am I going to continue to make sure that the system is correct? The other aspect is really understanding the biases in your data, right? That's a huge one. It probably needs a whole session by itself.
I was going to say, in 1 minute, can you just tell us how exactly we eliminate bias from data sets?
I wish I was that good and that fast. There's a lot of thinking that goes into play here. Because of all these challenges, my recommendation, and just like we did it, is start small, start careful. Start in a place that's not the most mission critical aspect of your government or in your company. Build a system that maybe it's just for internal users to make them better, and carefully monitor it. Start small, start really understanding how all this technology works, but really embrace your data.
And just to finish, how do you advise people manage the expectations of their key stakeholders? How do you make sure that they can push back and say, this is realistic and this isn't realistic? And I heard Sean Edwards talk about this at the World Government Summit, so it's absolutely accurate.
Yeah, I spend a lot of my day explaining, what's feasible, what's not feasible, at least this step. And now this is an incredibly fast-moving place. 6 months from now, I think we're going to be able to solve even more problems, and we're going to have better tools, et cetera. But I think it's really about articulating this space. Mm.
Okay, well, we're bang out of time now, so I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to join us, and of course, thank you to Sean Edwards.
We've got about 2 minutes left, and I want to talk about the regulatory environment. And it really does come down to trust. I think people are afraid, we're excited, we're looking at what our governments are doing, and then, when someone told me, go do your genomics DNA testing, but don't put your name and your birth date because, then they'll know where you are and what you're about, because you don't know what they're going to do with your data. How do you feel about this? Are we still in the experimental phase where we just don't know where it's headed?
I can only speak from a personal perspective. We all have loved ones who suffer from serious illnesses, I'm sure, unfortunately. If I could put my DNA, which is, again, 6 billion data points, openly on the internet.
Have you done that?
I'm happy to do so. I'll be happy to do so.
Okay.
If every scientist can look at it and give me advice how to live a better life, how to solve problems, diseases for my family, I do it gladly. This is why we are championing in the UAE right now to put this data set anonymously on a data platform. I was talking to Jensen about this a couple of days ago. Build a genome platform using AI to provide this powerful tool set to all the scientists, medical doctors, to collaborate together to find cures for human diseases. Isn't that a great cause?
Absolutely, to find cures, but can it be used for other things and things that are...
Yeah, potentially you can use it to discriminate, right? You can use that to invent certain chemical agents and biological agents to do harm. But there are always two sides to every serious issue. I think we, again, need to lead the world here. This the World Government Summit, after all, for the government officials to come together and agree on a common framework to work together. Because if we don't work together as like-minded government partners, trust me, there are other agents out there doing their own work in the dark. And that's very dangerous.
Exactly. And actually, humanity has proven that when things go down and things go bad, we can come together, coordinated global action.
Indeed.
We've done it before. We can do it again.
Absolutely.
Yeah? Peng Chao, thank you so much. What a pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you.